Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This week, a very important topic about Muharram, since the 10th of Muharram and Muharram itself has started. The 10th of Muharram will be taking place next week, according to who you follow, which calendar you follow. And I'll be going through some very important points regarding Muharram and the 10th of Muharram itself. So some of the topics that we will discuss throughout this session are what is Muharram, fasting in the month of Muharram, the day of Ashura, opinions on fasting on the day with Ashura, misunderstandings, grief and mourning, events, and do's and don'ts. So what is Muharram? Muharram is the first month of the Islamic calendar. It's a very sacred month, and Muharram is one of the Ashur Hurum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran Kareem, Inna shuhuri inda Allahi ithna ashara shahran fi kitabillahi yawma khalaqa as-samawati wal ard minha arba'atun hurum. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran Kareem that the number of months according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are 12. So the fact that there are 12 months during the year has been evidence from the Quran Kareem. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that of them are 4 months which are known as the Ashur Hurum. Now, what are these sacred months? Ashur Hurum, it means the sacred months. What are the sacred months? The sacred months Islamically are 4: Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah. So Dhul Hijjah is the month of Hajj. Then we have Muharram, and we have the months before Sha'ban known as Rajab. These are known as the sacred months. Another hadith mentioned by Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the Prophet ﷺ has said, the year consists of 12 months, 4 of which are sacred. 3 of them are consecutive, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Muharram, and the 4th between Jamad al-Ukhra and Sha'ban. Allama Suyuti rahmatullahi alayhi, a very great scholar, he further explains that the name Muharram, contrary to what the mushrikeen did in the days of ignorance. I mean, there is a verse in the Quran Kareem where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, إِنَّمَا النَّسِيءُ زِيَادَةٌ فِي الْكُفْرِ يُضَلُّ بِهِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. So the kuffar of Makkah and the disbelievers of Makkah, to fulfill their desires and to fulfill their enjoyment, they used to change the months of the year, because according to their belief also, fighting and engaging in war in these certain months was prohibited. So in order to fulfill their desires so that they could wage war further and beyond the sacred months, they would extend the month. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, according to one narration, إِنَّمَا النَّسِيءُ زِيَادَةٌ فِي الْكُفْرِ, that either extending the months or decreasing the months, this is a part of your disbelief. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it very clear in the Quran Kareem that 12 months exist. And obviously, according to Islamic calendar, they have either 29 or 30 days. So extending the month or decreasing the month is something which the kuffar of Makkah were indulging, and it's absolutely contrary to the Sharia. So Allama Suyuti rahmatullah, he explains that even before Islam, even before the advent of Islam, the name Muharram existed in the calendar. It was also referred to as Safarul Awwal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed the name to Muharram after Islam, and it's also referred to as a month of Allah. So engaging in war in these months was prohibited, but later on this rule became abrogated. Although some scholars say that even till today, waging in war in these months is not allowed, but according to the majority of the scholars, this rule has now been abrogated, and if the need arises, then war will be permissible in these months. Fasting during the month of Muharram. So the Prophet ﷺ said that the best fasts after the fast of Ramadan are those of the month of Muharram. You may have kept the fast of Arafah, the 9th of Zulhijjah, which had a different and separate virtue. But the month of Muharram, this also has a different virtue. So for the month of Zulhijjah, where you had the 9th of Zulhijjah, 2 years of sins were forgiven according to the hadith. And in this particular fast, we'll come to the virtue in a moment. So, as I mentioned before, that the month of Muharram is known as the month of Allah Ta'ala. All the months are the months of Allah Ta'ala. Obviously, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is the one who created the months. But to show the speciality of this month, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has referred to this month as his own. Shahrullah al-Muharram. Now, in this month specifically, we have a day known as the 10th of Muharram. Those of you who may follow Saudi Arabia, the 10th of Muharram will take place next Thursday. And if you're following Morocco or anywhere else, I'm not 100% sure, it might be Friday. But for those that follow Saudi Arabia, it's definitely next Thursday. So although Muharram itself is a sacred month anyway, all the days are sacred, but in specifically, the 10th of Muharram is more sacred than the other days. It's been narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu that when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, so after a long stay in his birth city of Mecca, when he migrated to Medina, he found that the Jews of Medina, because there were many Jews living in Medina at that time, so he found that the Jews of Medina were fasting on the 10th of Muharram. So he inquired, why do they fast on the 10th of Muharram? So the Jews, they claimed that it was the day on which the Prophet Musa والسلام, and his followers crossed the Red Sea miraculously, and the Pharaoh was drowned in its water. On hearing this from the Jews, the Prophet ﷺ said, I have more right to Musa والسلام, because I am his brother, and directed the Muslims to fast on the day of Ashura. What we've got to remember is at that specific time, the fast of Ramadan was not obligatory. So we could say, according to the narration, the fast of Ashura was obligatory at that time. The fast of Muharram was obligatory at that time. And then after the advent of, and after the ruling of the fast of Ramadan, the ruling of the fast of the 10th of Muharram was abrogated. So no longer did Muslims have to fast on the 10th of Muharram. So it's been reported in a number of authentic ahadith, as I just mentioned, that the fast of Muharram was obligatory upon the Muslims, and later on, for example, in this time and day, it's now optional. If a person keeps it, it's a massive source of reward. And if a person neglects the fast or does not keep the fast, there's no sin. Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says that before the fast of Ramadan was made farz, people fasted on the day of Ashura. They also shrouded the Kaaba on this day. However, when the fast of Ramadan was made farz, the Prophet ﷺ said, those who wish to fast on the day of Ashura, fast, and those who do not wish to fast may omit the fast. They may leave the fast out. It was the noble habit of the Prophet ﷺ that even after the fast of Ashura was no longer farz, the Prophet ﷺ still used to fast on the day of Ashura. Abdullah ibn Musa anhu, a companion of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, reports that the Prophet ﷺ preferred the fast of Ashura over the fasts of other days and preferred the fast of Ramadan over the fast of Ashura. The Prophet ﷺ said that whosoever fasts on the day of Ashura, I hope from Allah Ta'ala that it will expiate the sins for the previous year. So this is what I mentioned in the beginning. The fast of the 9th of Dhul Hijjah was an expiation for 2 years. So the fast, the year before and the year coming, the future year. And the fast of Ashura is an expiation for the sins of the past year. Now, just to clarify, what it means here is minor sins, because major sins can only be wiped out by making actual repentance and tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In short, it is established through a number of hadith that fasting on the day of Ashura is a sunnah. And the Prophet ﷺ has made it very clear that whosoever fasts on this day is entitled to a great reward. Now, another difference, a major difference, is that the Prophet ﷺ did mention that if I am alive next year, then I shall add a fast, either after or before. But with the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ did not live the following year. Hence, he did not fast an additional day. So meaning either on the 9th or the 11th. So now the ulama and the scholars, they have a difference of opinion. That is a person allowed to fast just on the day of Ashura, or must he or she fast either on the 9th and 10th or the 10th and 11th, making it 2 days? So obviously, taking the advice of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, it's more advisable that a person fasts either on the 9th and 10th or the 10th and 11th. And the reason for this, mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, was that the Jews used to fast on the day of Ashura alone. The Prophet ﷺ wanted to distinguish the Muslim way of fasting from that of the Jews. I mean, there's a very important principle here. And unfortunately, it's not adhered to as much. And that is distinguishing ourselves from the Jews and the Christians and any other religion who worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or any other religion who do not believe in the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, whoever they are. So Islam is a very unique religion. Islam is a religion where mixing other traditions is not allowed. An example, once the Prophet ﷺ, he saw some children who had such a haircut where there were parts of their hair were on their head and parts of their head were shaven. Like nowadays, you see these traditional haircuts, Mohican, shore back and sides, etc., etc. So, believe it or not, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, certain children did have so and so haircuts. The Prophet ﷺ, he despised this act, and he said, "You either shave it all off, or you keep all the hair." And according to one narration, there's a narration that says, "فَإِنَّهُ زِيُّ الْيَهُودِ which means, to the nearest meaning, that this is a tradition of the Jews. So anything that may cause a problem, may cause a type of mixing with Islam, has been prohibited by the Holy Prophet ﷺ, because the Islam is very unique. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept Iman and faith which has not been mixed with other traditions. So if the Jews or Christians are doing an event, or they're doing something that is more specific to their religion, then as Muslims, we are not allowed to take part in such events. Celebrating the fact that Jesus was born on 25th of December, that would not be allowed, because that has roots of Christian religion, and so on and so forth. There's many examples nowadays. So Islam is a very unique religion, and hence the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited a person from fasting only on the 10th of Muharram. So hence now there's two opinions. So as I mentioned before, there's two opinions, because the Prophet ﷺ did not keep an additional fast because he wasn't alive the following year. And according to his own advice, the Prophet ﷺ advice is that you keep an additional fast. So now the ulama and the scholars, they have two different opinions. The first opinion is that fasting only on the day of Ashura, only on the 10th of Muharram, is makruh, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Sumu yawma Ashura wa khalifu fihi al-yahud, fihi al-yahud sumu qablahu yawman wa ba'dahu yawman." The Prophet ﷺ said, fast on the day of Ashura and oppose the Jews. Fast the day before it or after it, on the 11th or the 9th. So according to this narration, it would be makruh, and it would be undesirable to fast only on the 10th of Muharram. The second opinion, and this is the opinion of majority of the Hanafi Jews, for example, Qadi Khan, Ibn Humam, and Ibn Abidin Shami, rahmatullahi alayhim. The second opinion is fasting exclusively on the 10th of Muharram is not makruh, according to the following hadith. And the hadith mentions the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina and he saw the Jews fasting on the day of Ashura. He said, "What is this?" They said, "This is a righteous day, a day when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved the children of Israel, the Bani Israel, from the enemies." So Musa alayhi salam, in gratitude, he fasted on this day. He said, "I have more right to Musa alayhi salam than you." So he fasted on the day and commanded the Muslims to fast. He commanded them because at that time it was obligatory. But once Ramzan became obligatory for fasting, the rule of fasting on the 10th of Ashura, 10th of Muharram, became abrogated. Sheikh Manzoor Nomani, rahmatullahi alayh, the author of Ma'arif al-Hadith, he and many other scholars do mention that nowadays you would hardly see any Jews at all fasting on the 10th of Muharram. So according to the second opinion, if a person fasts only on the 10th of Muharram, then it would not be makruh, it would not be undesirable. The person would receive the full reward just for fasting on one day, and a resemblance with the Jews would not take place because the Jews don't fast anymore. And that's the opinion of majority of the scholars. So it's optional. I mean, if a person does keep two fasts, either the 9th or the 11th and the 10th, then obviously for fasting one more day, there's more reward. But again, it's optional. So if a person does fast only on the 10th, a person will not be considered sinful. Now, again, in Muharram, there are many misunderstandings and also baseless traditions. Unfortunately, most of these myths and understandings relate to the 10th of Muharram and the day of Ashura. but according to Islamic sources, they have no basis. Some are, whoever takes a bath on the day of Ashura will never get sick. Distributing food and water. You may have seen many people on the 10th of Muharram, they make a lot of food and they think it's a source of reward, which is it's not a source of reward if you think it's a source of reward. But I'll come to something related to that in a moment. Wearing black to mourn the martyrdom of Imam Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and holding mourning ceremonies like the Shias do. You may have seen videos of the Shias battering themselves, especially this takes place in the country of Iran. These are all misunderstandings because Muharram in itself, according to the Sunni school of thought, has nothing to do with the martyrdom of Hazrat Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So all these bases, claims, and traditions, they are all baseless. Another misunderstanding is that in the month of Muharram is an unlucky month because Imam Hussein was martyred in it. And this is why we see sometimes some people have a misunderstanding, a misconception not to get married in the month of Safar and in the month of Muharram. But to be honest, that doesn't make any difference and it doesn't go against any Islamic sources. This is also a baseless concept. We totally agree that Imam Hussein's martyrdom is a very tragic event in history. But the Prophet ﷺ has forbidden us from holding mourning ceremonies on the death of any other person. If a person does die in family, then we are allowed to mourn their death for 3 days and not more. If a woman loses her husband, then she's allowed to mourn for 4 months and 10 days. But obviously, how this mourning has to take place, there are rules and regulations in place. For example, I'll give you examples in a moment. I mean, just say here, the people of Jahiliyyah, the people in the time of the Prophet, before the Prophet ﷺ, used to mourn over their deceased through loud lamentations by tearing their clothes and by beating their cheeks and chests. And this is exactly what the Shias do while they mourn the martyrdom of Hazrat Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. There's a narration that mentions that when a person does pass away, if a family member laments loudly, so crying loudly, that can become a cause of punishment for the person who has passed away. And hence, the ulama and the scholars do mention that when you make a will, you mention in your will that after I do pass away, I do not want anybody to cry or lament loudly. Mourning ceremony should be in place with Islamic rituals and nothing more. When a person does pass away, the first thing we should be saying is Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. So the topic is not about death, it's about Muharram. If you want any more information about that, then you can refer to your local scholars, how mourning should take place after death. Another very important part of Muharram, again, it's sometimes there's a misconception in place. We do see people on the 10th of Muharram, they cook food and they distribute food, which in itself is a really good act to do, a source of reward. But thinking it to be an act of reward only on the 10th of Muharram is a misconception. But hence, what is virtuous is spending on one's family on the day of Ashura. So according to the Saudi calendar, next Thursday. It is mentioned in a different narration. The Prophet ﷺ has said, "Man wassa'a ala ayalihi yawm ashura, wassa'a Allahu alayhi sa'ira sanatihi." The Prophet ﷺ has said, whosoever expands his expenditure on his family on the day of Ashura, 10th of Muharram, Allah Ta'ala will expand his sustenance and mercy on him for his entire year. A very beautiful hadith. Something that, inshallah, if you acted upon, a person will see the fruits of this hadith throughout the year. Now, some scholars, or some people, sorry, may say that this hadith is weak. But what I'd like to point out is that there are many ahadith which mention the same virtue. And when we look at the usul of hadith, when a weak narration has been supported by various other narrations, that weak narration then becomes, in fact, a strong narration. So hence, this would be classified as a strong narration also. Allama Sakhawi Rahmatullahi, he has a book called Al-Maqasid al-Hasana, where he's described, he's recorded many weak narrations. And he also mentions in this hadith that, in the commentary of this hadith, that this hadith is good to act upon. It's there's no problem in the chain of narration. Imam Tabrani Rahmatullahi, Imam Bayhaqi Rahmatullahi have also narrated this hadith as mentioned in Maqasid Hasana. And if anybody wants the text for this, I do have it with me. Shah Abdul Haq Muhaddis Dehlvi Rahmatullahi also mentions in Ma'tabata bis Sunnah that this hadith is Hasan. And many other scholars, including Hafiz Abul Fazl Muhammad ibn Nasir, has said that this hadith is Sahih. Okay, so what my point there was basically that this hadith is good to act upon, and whosoever acts upon it, inshallah, will see the fruits of this hadith. So how can we act upon this hadith? Very easy. On a normal day, the amount of, I'm sure every man in his household or every woman in her household are generous to their family anyway, but it's about being a slightly more generous on this day. So maybe a husband might want to buy his wife something extra. Okay, you might want to say to the wife, you don't need to cook today, we'll eat out. Maybe you can order something extra, or you could take the kids for shopping and tell them that you have a certain amount which you can buy anything you want. So basically, according to one's own means, being that more generous on that day, inshallah, you will see the fruits of this generosity throughout the year. Many scholars have said that we have acted upon this hadith and we have seen the generosity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the year and his mercy upon us. The next section is what events took place on Ashura. On this day, Adam alayhi salatu wasalam was created. On this day, the repentance of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam was accepted. On this very day, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and his people were saved from the Fir'aun. And on this very day, the martyrdom of Hazrat Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu took place. So to conclude, what should we do and what shouldn't we do on this day of Ashura? So we should fast on the day of Ashura. Again, that's optional. And also you can fast either on one day or 2 days. We should be indulging in optional ibadah, do the, more zikr, maybe read more Quran Kareem, pray more salah, making new resolutions in terms of one's spiritual life in preparation for the coming year, and spending on one's family with generosity. What we shouldn't do is treating this month as a month of grief and misfortune, wailing and mourning over the martyrdom of Hazrat Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, wearing black clothing as a symbol of mourning, and preparing a particular type of dish with the intention of sunnah on the 10th of Muharram. Because again, like I said, preparing a dish can be done all year. One last thing I'd like to mention is that there's another very a big misconception is that you may have read in some books that Qiyamah, the day of resurrection, will occur on the 10th of Muharram. And this has been mentioned in some books. But is this authentic or not? The answer to this is Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahmatullahi alayhi. He mentions in his commentary of Jami Tirmizi and Allama Yusuf Banuri rahmatullahi alayhi. He mentions also that I have not seen any such narration. Mufti Taqi Usmani Damu Barakatum also mentions that this hadith, this narration that the day of resurrection will occur on the 10th of Muharram is fabricated. So in conclusion, Qiyamah will not occur on the 10th of Muharram, or it may occur on the 10th of Muharram. But what we do know is that Qiyamah will occur on a Friday. And that has been proven from the hadith. And that's about it. I think I've kind of covered everything. And if there's any questions about Ashura or Muharram, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to end today's session here, unless somebody has any questions.